welcome back. We are going to continue talking about some Agile stuff in this episode, in this little mini course, as it were, a little mini lesson. We're going to talk about specifically the rituals involved in the Scrum development process. And there's 4 that we're going to talk about. Sometimes you'll see a 5th, but these are really the ones that we want to focus on because these are key to Scrum. And they are, for lack of a better term, or to summarize, Scrum rituals, these are the activities that are required for success. If you're doing Scrum and you're not doing these, you're not doing it right. You're missing out on some of the key things, particularly the Agile Manifesto points that make Agile what it is. The value, the way to do software in a way that says we're going to get the most value out of it. If you're not doing these, now there may be other things you're doing, but if you're not doing these, you're not doing Scrum right. The first one, the first ritual is probably what most people would expect even, is planning. The first thing you do before a sprint within Scrum, and just to be clear, sprints are predefined periods of time that we're going to basically do work. Typically, they run from 2 to maybe 6 or 7 weeks per sprint. And the way you do it is you do, for example, let's say it's a 2-week sprint. You'll do 2 weeks. At the end, you will deploy software and you'll go turn around and do another 2 weeks and make some changes and deploy software and add features and deploy software, so on and so forth. We talk more deeply about it in some of our other lessons and some of the other things. So you may want to bounce out and check out maybe like our overview for Scrum or something along those lines. Back to this topic, there are really 2 backlogs that are key in Scrum. And it is the product backlog, and then there's the sprint backlog. And during planning is when we move things, for the most part, from product to sprint backlog. Now, backlog is a list of things that we need to do. These are code that needs to be written, design that needs to be done, testing that needs to be done, things like that. These are the tasks that when they all get done, theoretically, in your product backlog, if all of those tasks get done, then theoretically that means that your product is done. You have a complete solution. Now, there is a ebb and flow essentially of tasks that are in that product backlog. So you may have a lot of stuff done, and then suddenly there's some changes, and then in future sprints, suddenly the product backlog gets really big again. Or it may get to the point which you have nothing left on your product backlog. You may even start a sprint with an almost empty product backlog, but because of discussions and where you're going, you may suddenly fill up your backlog. So in planning, the key really, the goal really, the objective is to fill up your sprint backlog, to put enough tasks, and this is in itself a bit of an art, to put enough tasks into your sprint backlog to keep the development team busy, to make sure that they're making the best use of their time, and really, almost more importantly, they are achieving an objective within this sprint. There is a theme or a goal or a set of goals or objectives that each sprint should have. Because if you remember, as I just said, you will deploy at the end of a sprint. So you're going to spend X amount of time, however long your sprint is, you're going to be doing some work, and then you're going to end up deploying that to your customers. So you want something that's useful, and you want to have useful progress at the end of each sprint. In planning, this is where we look at what's in our product backlog, and we try to find either families or groupings or themes of tasks and say, hey, if we want this sprint to be focused on this type of thing, then we're going to pull certain tasks in. We're going to pull the related tasks in. To do something, very simple example would be, let's say our sprint is going to do like user login and management. So if you look through the tasks, you may find a task that says create a login screen, create a forgot password, create a change password, log out, create a user or register a user. Those kinds of things would all be tasks that maybe you pull into your sprint, assuming that you can get them done within a sprint. Now, there's again an art to how you bring these in. We're not going to cover those in this discussion. We just want to sort of talk about the rituals as opposed to getting too deep into how to master them. Now, the next one that in sort of chronological order that you're going to bump into is the daily stand-up. Daily stand-up is, confusingly enough, a daily meeting. You're going to do this at the beginning of every day. Some places don't, or it's sometimes called a daily scrum. There's some places that try to do it every couple of days or something like that. Really, it's better to just do it as a daily meeting, and it's a stand-up. It's called a stand-up because the meeting should be so quick, it's not worth going in there and sitting down. That by the time you would sit down and get settled in, the meeting's done. So it's not a status. This is not everybody walking through and talking about what they're doing and all that kind of stuff. It should be quick and get out. And the goal of this meeting is that we're going to come in. We are going to talk it's really about where are we at with regards to our sprint. What are we working on? What did we get done, essentially? What are we working on today? Are there any blockers? So you could see it as sort of a Insta status or something like that. It's more of like a pulse check. And really what it is to make sure that we have people, all the development team working towards our goal. And if there's any obstacles, which is what the Scrum Master that's their goal, is to remove obstacles. If there's any obstacles, then those can be brought out and the Scrum Master can help us move forward. Now, once we get to the end of our sprint, there is the sprint review. This is effectively, it's almost like a demo type of a meeting. It can be, any length. It's going to be a set length when you get to it. And it could be as short as maybe 30 minutes, but that's, I think, rare. Typically, it's more like 1 to 2 hours. And this is where, as we've talked about, as you're going through your sprint, you're completing tasks and working towards a deployment. When you get to the end of the sprint review is where you go through those things that were completed, and you'll have essentially like maybe a customer representative there or the product owner, things like that. And you're going to go through and say, here's what we did, and you're going to show it. So it's not just a list of items and you say, well, we did this and we did that and we did this other thing. It is, this is what was done. This is what this looks like within the application. For example, in a bug, if there's a bug fix, you may say, here's what it did before. Here was the actions and how you generate the bug. And now with the code change, you take those same actions and you get, a successful completion or something along those lines. So your sprint review is where it could be called like a dog and pony or something like that, but it's really where you're showing off what got done in this sprint. What did we do? And then how does that work within the system that we're building? So when you deploy something at the end of your sprint, the sprint review is almost like the user education meeting where it says, okay, this is what's out there. This is what we're putting out in this release, how it works, how it fits together. There's more to it than that, but I think that should give you a good idea of what a sprint review is. Now, the last thing you do is a retrospective. And this is after your sprint review. You get to the end of your sprint and all the stuff you've done. And now we're going to look back at this sprint. We're going to say, okay, we're done. Let's take a look at how we did. And what we do typically in a retrospective, and they, again, vary a little bit, but the gist of it is it's going to be typically 30 minutes, probably more often an hour, maybe an hour and a half meeting. And you get everybody in the team, everybody in the development, everybody in the Scrum team. So this is the product owner, the Scrum Master, the development team. And you talk a little bit about what did we do right in this sprint? What went right? What is it? So this is that positive stuff. What did we do well? And then what are the things that we did wrong or that we need to stop doing or that we need to change? And so you have a meeting that is usually you try to get it sort of half and half as far as the retrospective part of it, which is maybe the first half or so of the meeting, is get some positive stuff, get some negative stuff. Because the goal, you have to have negative stuff. There has to be something that you can improve. Nobody's perfect. No sprint is perfect. So out of this retrospective, the initial part of it is going to be things that we want to continue, and then things that we want to change or start doing or stop doing. So, changes. Within those changes, then what we're going to do is look at them and say, okay, which of these, because you're probably not going to be able to do all of them. You're not going to go from here's a long list of issues and then boom, in the next sprint, you're done. Because what we're going to do in our next steps is say, how are we going to change in the next sprint? What are we going to change essentially right away? Because we're going to go from our retrospective effectively right into our planning for our next sprint. And I don't mean like physically in the meeting that you just, immediately go into it, but generally speaking, there's nothing else in the sprint. And then the next thing that technically you do as a team is sprint planning for the next sprint. So what we're going to do here in our retrospective is we're going to look back at what we did, how we did, and then as a group, figure out what makes sense for us to focus on to improve in the next sprint. We want something that is bite-sized or doable, something that is realistic as a goal that we can go into the next sprint. We can say, this is what we're going to change. And when we get to the next retrospective, we should be able to check off that, yes, we did it, or no, we didn't. And so that gives us a look back. How did we do? But with the focus, the intent of looking at what we did, how can we be better in the next sprint? And that really is the key to Scrum, is that while you want to there's a lot of little things that you want to get done, but the way it is going to be most effective for you as a team is if you are utilizing these things to be better at it every time you cycle through your sprint. Now, we have lots of details underneath what we have discussed. This is just a summary. So definitely check out some of our other videos. Check out school.developerpreneur.com. There are other places that you can go to find more information about each of these, but this should give you at least an idea if you're stepping into Scrum, or if you're Scrum curious, if you've wondered what this thing is, how does it work? This should give you a better idea of what are the key pieces of it. And now you can go out there and make sure that your team, assuming that you're using Scrum, is doing it right. Thanks a lot for your time.